Hi, thank you all for coming. Today's topic is salmon farming in Florida, and I think we all love salmon, so we are here to learn about it. But we learn a little of the science there. Our speaker today is Dr. Andrew Ropicki. He's an assistant professor and an extension specialist whose work focuses on marine resource economics. He's got a PhD in biology, is it? Food, yeah, but he considers himself an economist. He provides educational programming, decision support tools, and applied research results concerning marine economics to various marine shareholder groups. Uh, Audience groups includes aquaculture producers, commercial and recreational fisheries, state and federal marine resource agencies, seafood dealers, marine-related business owners, and other interested members of the general public like us. His research focuses broadly on management, fisheries management, aquaculture production, and seafood marketing. So from this, you'll gather that he doesn't personally do the seafood salmon farming, but more of a economics person with it. He will discuss today an exciting new method in aquaculture known as recirculating aquaculture systems. And he'll talk about how that is used in Florida and its potential for this form of aquaculture to increase U.S. seafood production. I think it'll be quite fascinating. Andrew, thank you for coming.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? Good. Okay. Yeah, so that was, she had me write my own introduction, and that was the long-winded way of saying I work with fishermen and fish farmers. Could have done it that quickly. And one thing I'll say really quick, while I will talk about salmon farming in Florida, I'm using that as a vehicle to talk about recirculating aquaculture and growing aquaculture in the US. So if you're just really interested in the idea of salmon farming, it'll be in there, but it's not the entire thing. But so just jumping right in, we do have salmon farming in Florida, which seems odd, right? If you know, salmon is a cold water species. Where it's farmed around the world, Norway, Chile, places with very cold water, you know, cold, coastal, sheltered environments where you can put in net pens and things like that. So how do we have people here in Florida? How do we have a company growing it in Homestead just outside of Miami? Well, like I said, they're using recirculating aquaculture systems. They grow these fish indoors their entire life cycle. Oh, that's fine. It's the ability it provides, this new type of fish farming has potential benefits to the US and other developed countries to really increase their fish production. So I'm going to start kind of with, we're going to go all the way back and talk about fisheries and just general seafood production. And what you're seeing here is from 1950 to 2020, global seafood production from wild capture fisheries, from people out in the open ocean catching fish. And what you see is we had a big run up till about 1990, and then it's kind of leveled off. And basically what's happened is it's a natural system and there's only so much carrying capacity it can provide. We can't just keep taking fish out of the ocean, no matter how much we used to think that was the case. It's just not. We've kind of leveled off over the last 30 years in terms of the seafood we're able to get from fisheries. And there is room in some areas to improve this with better management, but the gains would be minimal. And in the US, this is kind of a little different time scope. We're going 1980 to 2020, but you can see US landings have really kind of leveled off. They are what they are. And in the US, we don't have much room to improve our fishery landings. We manage our fisheries very well, and we are kind of at maximum sustainable yield or close to it. So kind of if we've hit this plateau in fisheries and what they're capable of, what's the solution? How do we keep getting more from marine environments? And it's aquaculture. And if you're not familiar with aquaculture, aquaculture is fish farming. It's the breeding. Sorry. Yeah, okay. The harvesting of finfish, shellfish, and aquatic plants. And what we have here is you're seeing the blue on this figure. That's our fisheries. That's what we just showed you globally. And then the orange is aquaculture production. And as you can see, aquaculture about 1990 really took off globally. And now we actually produce more from aquaculture than we do from wild capture fisheries. And you can see right there, you know, the increase, 569% increase in production volume over that 30 years from 1990 to 2020. It's the fastest growing food production technology in the world. And that period has come to be known as the Blue Revolution, that growth in aquaculture production. And the Blue Revolution has been really important globally. A little over 3.3 billion people get at least 20% of their daily animal protein comes from fish. So seafood's important. We have a growing population, and aquaculture has played a key role in feeding that growing population. And while the population has been growing, we've also been increasing our seafood consumption. As you can see, that second bullet point there, in 1960, globally, the average person consumed 10 kilograms of seafood a year. Now it's up to 20. And beyond just being a protein source for a large part of the world, seafood provides a lot of nutritional benefits you can't necessarily get from other sources. You know, omega-3s, we always hear about heart and brain health associated with omega-3s. A number of vitamins and minerals are found in high concentrations in fish that are important to human health. So we've kind of covered this blue revolution, this growth in aquaculture. And the next question is, has the blue revolution been global? We were showing you global production, but where is this production taking place? Where is this growth taking place? And the answer is almost exclusively in Asia. They account for 92% of our aquaculture production. About 57% is China alone. But what's interesting is while that's a large amount, we are starting to see growth in other parts of the world. South America and Africa are starting to eat into those percentages. They're producing more and more fish through aquaculture, and it's a growing industry. The place where we're not seeing growth in aquaculture is developed countries like the US. At the start of aquaculture, when it was in its infancy, you know, 1970, these countries were at the forefront. They accounted for roughly a third of global production. But by 2021, they accounted for less than 5%. So as the rest of the world kind of adopted this technology and this food production method, developed countries just sat on the sidelines, with one exception, which we'll talk about. And the US is a really good example of this. In 1970, the US was the third largest aquaculture producer in the world. As of 2021, it's the 19th largest. So we have really kind of fallen down in that regard. Now, developed countries do have some success stories. In the US, we produce a lot of catfish. We also do shellfish, clams, and oysters. And crawfish are pretty good size, but when you look at it globally, it's not much. So if we look at US seafood production right here, so our blue is our wild capture, that's our fisheries, we've already seen that, and now we've added our aquaculture on top, and you can see we just haven't really done anything. The industry has not grown. We don't see that growth we saw globally where aquaculture played a big role. And it's not a lack of demand in the US because we are the world's largest seafood importer. And it's kind of interesting. If you look at this graph, I can't overlay it with the other one, but it's about 1990 where our seafood imports really start to take off. And that's where the Blue Revolution really started to take off. So we are a seafood importing country. So it kind of raises the question of, why doesn't the US do more aquaculture? If we have this demand for it, if we're seafood importers and we know we've kind of tapped out what we can get from wild capture fisheries, why aren't we doing more aquaculture? And there are a couple of reasons that have been put forth for this. Some of the reasons cited are restrictive and burdensome regulations. And I'm going to talk a lot about that today. And I want to, before I get into it, I'm talking about it from a competitive standpoint. So when I get into these environmental regulations that are negatively impacting our traditional aquaculture, I'm not saying our regulations are good or bad. I'm just saying it makes it harder for US producers to compete. We also have quite a bit of social opposition to aquaculture, and we have high land and labor costs. But you know what? Norway has those same issues. It's a developed country. It's extremely wealthy. It has high labor costs, yet they have succeeded. They are the one developed country that is a major player in aquaculture. In 1970, you know, they had almost no aquaculture in terms of global production, but by 2021, they were up to the largest producer by quantity, fifth by value.
The Zoom people weren't hearing, so I just switched mics. I'm sorry to bother you.
If anyone has any questions or you want to hear, just feel free to interrupt me. I'm good with it. So what Norway does is they do salmon aquaculture, but they do it the traditional way, which is this. So you grow your salmon on land during their early stages at freshwater. You grow them out to a certain size, they become smolt, and then they're ready to go out into the ocean for that part of their life. And they go into these giant net pens where they're grown out and up to a marketable size and then harvested and they go into the supply chain. And salmon in particular, you know, if you get salmon on a menu, you get it somewhere and it doesn't specifically say it's wild caught, or if it says it's Atlantic salmon, it's farmers. And I'm not saying that's a problem with that, that's a good thing. It's more food production, but most of the salmon available now is farmers. And these farmers, growing fish this way does have some environmental drawbacks. As you can see, these net pens are out in open waters, so they have issues at times with fish escapes, with disease transmission from aquaculture fish to wild fish. And then they've also had problems in Norway, additionally with harmful algal blooms. Basically, they don't have red tides, but they have similar events. And some of it's related to having so many fish in close proximity to each other, and they produce a lot of waste, which leads to too much nutrients. So thinking about traditional aquaculture, because I realize, you know, this might be something you're not super familiar with. So I'm going to go over some of the techniques here. A lot of what we talk about with aquaculture is pond-based production. So that picture up in the upper left-hand corner there, that's a Mississippi catfish farm. And all those ponds have catfish in them, and the growers will use small ponds for small fish, and then they'll move to bigger ponds. And it's extensive. That's one of our bigger industries here in the US. And you can tell, hopefully you get a scale of that. That is a lot of acreage covered by ponds right there. Some of these ponds could be 20, 50 acres
for a single pond. The second picture here, just below it. Oh. Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, so this is another type of aquaculture that is big in the US. This is shellfish aquaculture, and it's specifically, we're talking about oysters here. So the way this works is you see each one of these little pairs of plastic floats has a cage underneath it that's under the water. And in that cage, you've got oysters growing. And kind of, not to, just for some fun stuff, it's not too dry. When they want to clean the cages, basically, because things start to grow on, that's something called biofouling, where other filter feeders want to be on that cage and catch that stuff coming through, and it impacts your oysters in the cage because they're eating the food that would go to your oysters. What they do is they take these and they flip them over so that the floats are on the bottom, the cage is exposed to the air, and the air kills the biofilm, the organisms that have gotten all over the cage. And you obviously have to flip them back over, or your oyster will die, but it's a mitigation strategy there. And then down here, this is our salmon farm. And this is kind of what aquaculture looks like in the developed world. Over here, this is seaweed farming in China. As you can see, it is taken over that bay. And as you can imagine, this probably isn't ever going to happen in the US. I mean, you can't imagine people in $1 million homes along Tampa Bay being okay with this taking over Tampa Bay. Similarly, this is a shrimp aquaculture facility in Ecuador. And it's pond-based, but if you look up, you can kind of see differences in design. The catfish farm, looks like it's got more elevation around the ponds, so potentially some overflows and environmental degradation associated with effluent runoff. Whereas this, the ponds are all on top of each other. You can see there's natural water right there just outside. Looks like there's a river there. It kind of comes down to part of the things, part of what holds back U.S. aquaculture is kind of our concern for environmental amenities and things like that. I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just saying it's kind of is what it is. So if we start thinking about some of these aquaculture obstacles, there were a series of papers recently, really good work with all of the U.S. aquaculture industries kind of go, well, what's holding you back? Where are regulations causing problems for your industry? And one of the biggest ones is bird degradation. We're talking about pond-based aquaculture. Birds love fish. You've got small fishing ponds that are going to come eat them. And the U.S. with more stringent environmental regulations limit the ways you can control for this bird degradation. And this is an example right here. This is a cormorant. These guys are the scourge of the catfish industry because they just, they're very efficient. And when your fish are small like that, that's easy pickings for them. Another problem is interstate shipping of live species. A lot of our aquaculture industry is broken up into different pieces along the life cycle of the fish. So you'll have a farm in Arkansas that grows fingerling catfish, the little ones, and they will get shipped to a growing farm that has the big ponds for growing out full-size fish. And the regulations around shipping live species are burdensome, according to our industry people. Not to mention, it's hard to do. Moving fish is not easy. If you've ever seen the trucks that are live fish hauls, you have to be constantly putting oxygen into the tanks. You have to worry about You don't feed the fish for a few days leading up to transport, things like that. It's a challenging, issue. Another issue, effluent discharge, you know, where your wastewater is. And then lastly, restrictions on antibiotics use. And this is kind of one of those cool ones. I thought about showing you all a picture of sea lice on salmon, but that's kind of gross, and we just ate lunch. So I figured I'd show you the solution to it in order. So obviously, you know, antibiotics would be the most efficient way, but there are negative environmental consequences to using those antibiotics. So what they've come up with in Norway is pretty cool. These are cleaner fish, and you grow them, you put them in your net pens with your salmon, and it's a symbiotic relationship. You know, they control the sea lice populations, they get something to eat. Makes for a really cool story if you're just thinking about this in dollars and cents, not the way you would want to control your parasites. It's kind of expensive, but it does work. But these are some of the issues facing our industries here. We've also got social opposition, and it comes, you know, a lot of the environmental concerns really overlap with our regulatory issues. The idea of dealing with nutrient waste and negatively impacting environments. Obviously, people are concerned with that. Escape fish, when we're talking about those net pens we showed in in Norway. Some of the fish do get out and they can intersperse with natural populations and cause problems. In fact, what you're seeing right here, if it's where my pointer is, that is salmon net pens in Washington State. And a storm destroyed all those net pens, and the Atlantic salmon got out of the wild. Well, that's a problem because Atlantic salmon aren't native to the Pacific, as the name implies. And this led to the stopping of salmon and aquaculture in the state of Washington. They said, we're not going to have this in the state waters. So that's an issue, kind of the escape fish. And then transmission of diseases and parasites to wild fish populations. That's another one. You have these fish in such tight quarters in these net pens. If you have an outbreak, it spreads quickly, and with them being in the same environment of wild species, they can have those parasites being transmitted to wild populations. Aesthetic concern, we kind of already hit on this. You're not going to see this off of Florida's coast, right? Granted, that might be taking it to an extreme, but there is a lot of NIMBYism, which not in my backyard, if you're not familiar with that term. So a lot of people like the idea of aquaculture fish production, but they don't want to see it in their backyard. A lot of people like wind energy or solar, don't want it in their backyard. That's NIMBYism, and there are aesthetic concerns. And then lastly, competition with other stakeholders, and mainly this is fishermen. This is recreational and commercial fishermen who have concerns about escape fish, transmission of disease. But even beyond that, you know, if you're putting in marine net pens for aquaculture, you're competing with fishing grounds. That space they could be using for fishing, and the fishermen, as you might guess, don't like that. And then lastly, land and labor costs. And what you're seeing right here is this figure is hourly wages in Norway, the United States, developed countries on average, and then developing and in transition countries. And they're all in dollars, and we use something called purchasing power parity to become the same, but the key takeaway here is we're trying to make it apples to apples. And what you see is to employ someone for an hour in Norway is incredibly expensive. Incredibly expensive in the US, $40. In in developing and in transition countries, the places where the blue revolution has been occurring, is, you know, less than 1/4 the cost and less than 1/5 the cost compared to Norway. So the idea kind of becomes, given that disadvantage the U.S. and developed countries have, if you're gonna do the exact same thing in a labor-intensive industry that those developing countries are gonna do, you're not gonna be able to compete. I mean, you're gonna lose because if you're hiring the same labor at 4 times the cost, that's gonna be problematic. And this is kind of going back to Norway is the exception, the country with the same issues and obstacles that the U.S. has had that has succeeded. Kind of the way they've done that is by innovating, by coming up with new techniques and new ways of doing stuff that are capital intensive, you know, using machines and cutting out labor and making their labor more productive to make up for the fact that they have to spend so much more money on it. And that's really what we're going to try to get into the practice. That's the benefit here. And then also, I won't go into the details, but land costs are expensive in the US as well. And it's another advantage of grass-based aquaculture. Okay, so now moving into some fun pictures. So recirculating aquaculture systems, what the kind of topic is here today. Land-based aquaculture production systems. You go fish indoors in a highly controlled environment. And this method of doing it allows you to raise a lot of fish in a little bit of water. You can control the growing environment and the production process to a level that, you know, allows you to do things that people who count on natural environments to grow their fish can't do. It's also capital and technology intensive. And these are pictures I took on a trip to Atlantic Sapphire. This is our salmon farmer here in Homestead. And I wanted to try and give you the scope here. I'm a pretty good swimmer. I grew up in Florida. I don't know if I can make it from one side of these tanks to the other. It is a long way. And they are 2.5 stories tall. Each one of these grow out tanks, they have 19 of them in their phase 1 facility, holds as much water as 33 Olympic-sized swimming pools. This is their phase 2 facility. They're not switching to outdoor production. They have to build the tanks first and then build the building around it, given the size of the tank. So it's extremely capital intensive, but it's, as we're going to kind of go through now, we've talked about the obstacles and these issues with U.S. aquaculture production. And now we're going to look at how this system of growing fish kind of deals with those issues. And I'm going to kind of go through this in like 3 legs of the stool. I'm going to talk about some of the benefits in terms of marketing the fish, actually selling the fish you grow, the benefits with regards to production, and then with regards to some of those issues we talked about, regulatory and social opposition to aquaculture. So from a marketing perspective, grass provides one really big advantage. When you're growing fish indoors and you can control the growing environment, you don't have to worry about what you can grow locally. You need to worry about what you can sell. I mean, we've got salmon farmer growing a cold water species in Homestead, Florida. So they can focus on what they can sell. If we look at U.S. aquaculture production, and remember, RAS, recirculating aquaculture systems, are brand new. So these are kind of, these people I have here are the cutting edge. So this is all more traditional aquaculture. Well, we produce catfish, crawfish, oysters, trout, and our 5th most produced species is salmon. You got to go all the way down here to our 9th most produced, get the shrimp. And part of the reason we don't do much of that is environmentally we're not well set up for it. You want extremely warm climates, even warmer than we can get. And we have some producers in extreme South Florida and extreme South Texas, but generally we're not hot enough, to grow shrimp outdoors. But if we come down here and look, you have seafood consumption through the years. This is shrimp, screen line right here. So our most consumed seafood is shrimp, and it's not even close. About 30% of the seafood consumed now is shrimp in the US. Number two, this red line, that is salmon. And you can see it's not as far ahead, but it's kind of on an upward trend here. Salmon consumption is getting a lot more popular. Canned tuna was third line fall. And then down here, we have tilapia and pollock. It's two other species that Americans consume. Notice we don't see catfish, we don't see crawfish, we don't see oysters, we don't see trout. But what we do see is the two things that Americans like to eat the most, shrimp and salmon. It's what we're growing in Florida in these recirculating aquaculture systems, because these people, homegrown shrimp, I'll talk a little more about that in a second, and sun shrimp, they're producers here in Florida, like Atlantic Sapphire, only they're growing shrimp. Atlantic Sapphire grows salmon, and because they have so much control over the growing process, they've been able to focus on what people want to buy, what they can sell, not what they can grow. Additional benefits, that control over the production process allows you to time your production to match demand. Here in the US, our demand for seafood goes up around Christmas in the winter months, and it goes up for Lent. And our aquaculture producers and our wild capture fisheries can't meet the excess demand that occurs at those times because it's not the right fishing season. They can't catch the fish, or the weather's not right, they can't grow the fish. So right now, what happens is that excess demand in those kind of places are filled by seafood imports. But grass has the potential to time your production to capture those high value markets. Additionally, just the idea of that control allows you to have consistent year-round production. And retailers and wholesalers and seafood buyers are going to be willing to pay a premium for consistency in production. That's what we're after that you do, produce year-round and sell in something and leave fresh seafood markets. The production benefits, one of them is we talked about land cost low. Is extremely efficient in how much fish you can grow per acre per year. This is kind of astounding. So pond-based catfish production, established industry. So this isn't really an apples to apples comparison. This our salmon grower here in Florida is yet profitable. They're a new firm trying to get their leverage. But catfish production, they can produce 17 tons of fish per acre per year. That's really good by animal protein production standards. That's a good number. Well, Atlantic Sapphire in the first quarter of 2024 had a production rate 3,789 tons per acre per year. And that's over 200 times the efficiency in terms of land use. And they're still growing out their system. That's not where they want to be. Their phase one facility, the building I'm going to show you in a second, is designed to grow about 9,500 tons per year. And if they hit that, that would be 7,825 tons per acre per year. Now, there might be other sustainability issues associated with circulating aquaculture system, but efficient use of land is not one of them. This provides a lot of benefits in terms of saving on land costs and allows growers to locate near larger markets, valuable markets. We have a salmon grower in Homestead, Florida, right outside of Miami. One of our largest shrimp producers in the US, United States shrimp producers, is located in Los Angeles. Because why? Lots of restaurants, people to sell to, right? Another thing is more efficient use of feed. When we think about salmon specifically, these recirculating aquaculture systems, feed conversion ratios are very close to 1. What that means is 1 kilogram of feed leads to roughly 1 kilogram of fish growth, which is quite impressive. And I mean, it's not quite one, it's in the ballpark, but comparing their numbers to Atlantic Sapphire for the first quarter to industry numbers from net pen salmon, it's a 17% improvement relative to net pens. And that's important from a sustainability aspect as well, because one of the things that they're getting much better with aquaculture, but to grow fish, especially predatory fish like salmon, you have to feed it. And what we want to do, it doesn't make a lot of sense to grow a pound of salmon if it takes us 2 pounds of wild captured fish to feed them. Now, the fish in, fish out ratio, that idea of how many fish we have to feed to grow a pound of fish, it's below 1. They become efficient in that, and they're using other food sources as well. But any improvement would be beneficial, and 17% improvement is pretty big. And from a long run potential of this type of production strategy, fish feed is your biggest expense for growing salmon. So 70% reduction is good to have. And then lastly, decreased costs associated with parasites and diseases. When you grow these fish indoors in this controlled environment, where you're using high filtration and things like that, it's much harder for parasites and diseases to get into your system. Now, that said, it comes with a caveat that if they do get into your system, it's a bigger problem. If you have, blocked yourself off on a natural environment, once they're in there, they're hard to deal with, but they're much less likely. And then lastly, this other production benefit, I kind of already touched on this, but with RAS, with recirculating aquaculture systems, we're using a very capital-intensive, high-tech production strategy where we're using a lot of knowledge intensively. You go down to their farm, yes, you see the big tanks with fish, but you also go through rooms of folks working on computers who are monitoring those systems. They don't look like fish farmers anywhere else. It's a high-tech industry. And that kind of plays to the strengths of the US and other developed countries. As we said, you remember this one, we're not going to be able to compete doing the exact same things other countries are doing because our labor costs, we're up here, they're down here. But the way developed countries kind of get around this is they focus in on capital intensive, knowledge intensive industries. What we're looking at over here is a measure of productivity per hour. Norway's up there, this is here, developed countries. So they're making up for it by using more high tech and getting more out of every hour of labor you use. So the benefit there is with RAPS, we can kind of play to the strengths of our economy. Okay, so thinking about the regulatory benefits, we talked about those obstacles. Well, bird depredation, that's not going to happen. It's indoors. You don't have to worry about birds eating fish. It limits the need for interstate shipping of live fish. These are all in one facilities generally. This is, when I talk about Atlantic Sapphire's production, this is their first facility. They're building phase 2. It's going to be a much bigger building. But this is phase 1. They import their eggs from Europe. I'll show you a picture of what that looks like. So one of those giant tanks I showed you earlier. Everything else is done in-house. They grow the little fish, the fries, the smolts, fully to grow out. And then they have a processing facility as well. So everything happens inside. There's not a whole lot of shipping. Homegrown shrimp. This is one of our red-faced shrimp producers. They are in Indian Tank, Florida. Nothing has to come in their system. They have their own root stock. They produce their own larval shrimp. They grow them up to market size. They process them and then they sell them. There's no interstate shipping. The only shipping they do is they actually provide larval shrimp to other growers. They can do the entire grow out process themselves. And then the water filtration limits effluent discharge, this idea of environmental concerns, of releasing things, fish waste and stuff into the water, increasing eutrophication and nitrogen in natural water bodies. Well, with rats, you already have had to deal with that in your water supply because you are growing fish at high stocking densities indoors. You better have good filtration to get the stuff out, or you're going to kill your fish. So they've already filtered their water. It's part of the process. And, I'm not going to say it's as clean as when it went in, but compared to other forms of aquaculture, it is a lot cleaner when it goes out of the system. And homegrown shrimp is really interesting. They have a zero discharge permit. I don't know exactly how they do it, but they do not have to discharge water. So that's another big advantage, environmental. So if you're kind of seeing, we're getting over some of those obstacles to aquaculture in the US. And then we're also producing fish in a manner that matters to the average American. We wouldn't have those regulations and stuff if we didn't care about protecting the environment and things like that. So this kind of, is a double bonus. The social acceptance benefits, the stakeholder conflict. I've been to Atlantic Sapphire. I don't think the fish is going to get up and walk out of there and hitchhike to someplace where it can live. There's no real concern with fish escape for them. They are, let's say it's 20 miles, and that I have to double check. Disease, parasite transmissions to wild stocks, once again, not going to happen. Effluent discharge issues, we already talked about that. They have cleaner water. They have limited or no use of public waterways. That's a big sticking point here in the US for net and aquaculture. People want to grow fish out in the open ocean. Like we said, fishermen don't love that. If you don't compete with them, it's not a problem. And what's kind of interesting is this social acceptance, or the flip side of that, we're talking about social opposition. It kind of comes with how much competition you provide. And one interesting thing is shellfish aquaculture, which is done out in open waters. Those cages I showed you, that's out in the Gulf of Mexico. Has faced a lot less social opposition. Part of that is they're filter feeders. They are cleaning the water. They're providing a service. They provide benefits to those fishermen. They're providing ecosystem services, and they have low environmental impacts. And that's kind of where RAS is. We can't say it's got positive ecosystem services, but the environmental footprint, the environmental impacts are much less. So before, you all think about investing in these companies, and it's the next great thing, there are challenges facing this, There are very few established profitable firms. This is an industry that is just getting going. It's got high capital, energy, and labor costs. And I put that current, because right now it's still getting the legs under them. Longer run, as it becomes more established, the hope is that these labor costs will become more manageable as they're able to automate, use that high-tech workforce more efficiently. And then high technology, technologically intensity combined with high stocking densities increases the risk of catastrophic failures. If you think about it, if you're putting a lot of fish into a tank and the system's recirculating, you have to add oxygen to the water. You have to take nitrogen out. You have to do lots of stuff. And if your filters break down and your oxygenation system breaks down, you got problems. So they are at risk of that. But that's kind of the trade-off they're making, right? If you think about it, we're going from a natural system where you're at the mercy of Mother Nature, and you are negatively impacting it through fish waste and things like that. Well, now you're at the mercy of technology, and you need your stuff to work. And they're working on a lot. We are actually put in a proposal with them. I'm working with someone from industrial and systems engineering, where we are going to try and use machine learning and AI to better their systems. Their systems, all those tanks, all that water filtration and everything, they collect 22,000 points of data every hour. And they kind of don't know what to do with it. So we have an AI specialist who's going to try and work with them. So including remarks, RAS-based production, they said it's still new, still hurdles to be overcome, but it has the potential to be the path forward for U.S. aquaculture and developed countries. One of the interesting things we pointed to Norway as our success story. People in this industry kind of take some solace here in the US in the idea that the Norwegians themselves are moving towards RAS. When they're trying to stay competitive, pretty much all of their fish for grow-outs to put in the net pens now are grown in these land-based RAS systems almost exclusively. So they're using it for that stage. They're growing larger fish for net pen stocking because they have rules on how many fish they can have out there at a time. So if they can get them to a bigger size on shore and then move them out to the pens, that's less time in the water, they can move more fish through their leases. And they're also doing full grow systems. Atlantic Sapphire, the company here, they are actually a Norwegian company. They're on the Norwegian stock exchange. They are growing fish in Florida. So there's one of the tanks. You can see the scope. This is homegrown shrimp. We showed you the picture. You can see it's quite an operation. Lots of this is their grow out facility. We've got most of their juveniles as well. But and then, as I said, it has the potential to better match the strengths of the U.S. economy. So a couple last things. So we'll go over this. I talked about how they have to import eggs. So to fill this tank, 33 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Right. This amount of eggs. So you can see why shipping the eggs works. This is sun shrimp. It's one of our shrimp producers here. With the freshwater Florida label, all their stuff, and there's some meal and sapphire. That did I take any questions?
Thank you, that was fascinating. Could you describe a little bit the RAS system? You didn't talk about that.
Yeah. So that's the problem with like I don't know the engineering of it. So basically, if we'll talk about the next. So they pull their water from the South Florida aquifer. And when you think about it, though, there's not a huge amount of competition, even though they're growing a lot of fish with water from aquifer that Floridians want to use, because 95% of the aquifer water they're pulling is salt water below the fresh water. It comes into the system. They do some minor treatments, I believe, to change the alkalinity, although I'm not 100% sure. And it goes into separate systems. So they have a area that's freshwater tanks for their small fish, the eggs, if they're trying to get them up to size, because that's when they're in freshwater stage. And they have within the system, they have tubes that run between their tanks. And when it's time to move the fish, you don't want to move them with nets or by hand, because it stresses the fish. So they open up these kind of spillways, and the fish are led into their next tank for growth and reduces stress, because the fish don't mind going swimming through a tunnel. They don't want to be as caught in a net. All of their systems, and it's really the big grow out tank sort of gets interesting, because that's you've got a lot of biomass and a lot of fish producing a lot of waste and eating a lot of food. And they have a number of different types of filtration. They have mechanical filtration, which removes solids and fat. They have biological filtration, which helps them deal with the nitrogen that's produced in the water, so it doesn't become toxic to the fish. They have to add oxygen to keep the fish healthy at higher stocking densities. And I want to say they recycle the water in their system, like a new batch of water comes in. I have to look at it, it's either 10 or 20 days, a new batch of water comes in, which might not sound like recycling if you're thinking, oh, I should never switch out the water, but compared to other forms of aquaculture, tank-based where we have flow-through system, I mean, they're moving the water through every 2 hours. So it really is quite impressive what they do that.
Thank you. Questions?
Is there a market for the waste products for fertilizer to be used by farmers?
That is a great question. So we actually have, they are working, with some of my colleagues at IFAS, to see if they can use the fish waste, if they do get it's a slug, it's a biosolid of the waste, for as fertilizer. Because in freshwater fish farms, yes, you can use it in the secondary market and it's great. Here, you gotta remember, the water's a little salty. Early results, and I'm not a microbiologist, they think they're gonna be able to use it. They're working with the IFAS people down at the, at TREC, the Tropical Research and Education Center down in Homestead, to look into that. But yes.
Thank you.
We have one here on Zoom. Pat Harden, go ahead, unmute.
Yes. There's some sound problems, so I really couldn't hear, and I probably missed a lot of things. But I have a question about, do you use any pesticides at all?
Absolutely not. They're at least, I can tell you,
Okay.
fire, no pesticides, no antibiotics.
Okay, and I have, how do you cool the water since they're cold water fish?
So they have chillers that are a sight to see. And that has been a problem, to be completely honest. They got an update today, gonna go look at it, hopefully it's up later. Last summer, their chilling capacity, it didn't lead to fish die-offs, but Miami went through 100 straight days where the heat index was over 100 degrees. And their chiller capacity couldn't quite keep up. They want the temperature, 14 degrees is kind of a sweet spot, 14 degrees Celsius. It's kind of a sweet spot for them, but they were up around 17 or 18 last summer, and it had a big negative effect. It didn't kill the fish, but they stopped eating and they started maturing more quickly. That's the problem when you're growing animals. So when they mature quickly, you're not going to get the weight gain you want. They become a lot less efficient in their food conversion ratio, how much eat it turn into fish you can sell. I am working with them right now. They're working with Florida Power to add solar to their facility. I'm trying to get them to take advantage of the USDA program. I think they're well suited for it because they use a lot of electricity. I mean, it is in that regard. Their fish don't fly, that's kind of their tagline. And like I said, you're gonna get from anywhere else, more likely it's flowing in from Norway or Chile, so that's a big environmental footprint. Right now, they need to be part of footprint of their electricity use down. So they're looking to add solar to their facility, and they're also looking at a potential, getting back to their waste streams of an anaerobic digester. So basically, they take that waste, put it in an anaerobic digester, and produce methane, which they can use to help power their facility, and then they get a product, a slug product that you can still use. It's energy intensive.
Okay, I have energy consumption is one of my questions, and then you're using aquifer water? Is that, I'm assuming, from the Biscayne aquifer?
And yeah, I think, for some reason that's in Florida, but I'm not sure that it seems like it should be Biscayne. But once again,
No,
They're-
yeah,
they use a lot of pressure. They're pulling salt water, and I've heard that they're helping saltwater intrusion because they're pulling salt water that would be intruding on the freshwater supplies happening.
Okay, we have a question here in the room.
So, while somebody wants to go to the business, can you go to the IFAS extension office and get a lot of good literature?
You can, what I would say is, there is room for kind of small scale production in this space, but for what they're trying to do, I mean, they're bankrolled with millions. I mean, they've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in that facility. I mean, think about it, let me give you a little more information on it. So right now, that phase one facility, that building I showed you a picture of, at full grow out, that should be able to produce 9,500 metric tons of salmon a year. That is changed soil, they're adding to it, that's another 15,000. So if they get that level of production, roughly 25,000, Florida becomes the biggest salmon aquaculture state in the US. They have big aspirations. That's them only using about 20 acres of the 160-acre tomato farm they bought for their facility. Long term, they want to produce 300,000 tons per acre. Sorry, not per acre, 300,000 tons. That would mean your local aquaculture salmon would be Norway, Chile, homestead. There's stuff you can learn on it in extension place, but their scale isn't mom and pop. They are multinational. There are other people looking at it as well. But we do have smaller scale operations. Some our shrimp producers are big. One of them is a big multinational as well. But we have smaller scale producers. We have a pompano grower down in Southeast Florida using this type of system. So there are opportunities. There's a lot you can find. Tropical Aquaculture Lab has information on this. There's extension documents, like you said. The Southern Region Aquaculture Center at USDA group has tons of stuff on aquaculture. Yeah, you can look it all up. It's all good.
Thank you. I found this extremely promising way to go. And I have a question which you sort of partly answered, and that is, are there any sort of serious environmental things that might stand in the way of this moving forward as we'd like it to?
So I think the one right now would be their energy use. And then, they're on a certain scale, you start to think about, they do have waste streams, they do have effluent, they do have wastewater they need to get rid of. If we're already it's just whether the US wants to do that or not. And the cat is out of the bag. I would say their production per ton is greater than anything else in the world in terms of wastewater production, waste, and negatives, things like that. It would just be energy.
I'm surprised that you haven't mentioned tilapia. It's my favorite, and I think it says farm raised with tilapia. What's unique about tilapia production?
Tilapia is one of the most aquaculture species out there. They're easy to grow. You don't need to feed them a lot of fish protein, so the fish in, fish out ratio is great. We have a tilapia industry here in Florida. Probably not what you're buying in Publix. It's one of those ones where the rest of the world can do it very efficiently in ponds. So the big contracts kind of go where, it's commoditized, you're so efficient that the price, you go lowest price. And that's what tilapia will be in other parts of the world. Our tilapia industry is really interesting. It does well, but it focuses on ethnic markets that value a live product, which, only our growers do produce. You're not gonna ship them live on a tanker across, the world. So that's where our production focuses on ethnic markets, around, a lot of them are in the Northeast, but that's where a lot of our tilapia production. But
Question on Zoom.
Well, Pat's waiting. John, did you have a question? John Axe? Or Bob?
You were saying this back to say, when it's selling with people 2 or 3 pounds a week, where does it come from?
my guess would be Chile. So Norway's the biggest producer, Chile's a little behind them. So if you were thinking globally, it's more likely to come from Norway. For some reason, we're the big market for Chile. You can get Norwegian salmon. I know if you go to Trader Joe's, their salmon is Norwegian. And if anyone wants to try it, Atlantic Sapphire, it's at Publix in your seafood case. It'll have the only one that says fresh from Florida next to it. And I don't want to take too long, but kind of a funny thing. I work with these people, so I always like to quiz the guys in public. So I have a seafood counter on what they know about it. Don't tell them if I am salmon from Florida. How does that look? Atlantic Sapphire needs to do some better outreach with their salespeople. I get good answers. I mean, they all know this idea, it's more environmentally friendly, it doesn't fly halfway across the globe, it's shipped up from Miami. How do they grow? And I've gotten answers, they grow now down there. That's interesting.
Is it frozen at Publix?
No, it's in the fresh can, and that's one of their benefits.
I have a question on costs and to answer John's question. I looked up the average price of salmon and tilapia. Salmon is $10 to $15 an hour. Tilapia is $1 to $2.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's part of the reason we struggle to compete. And why our tilapia industry goes to the live fish markets.
but on the cost side, why salmon in South Florida, why not in a colder environment?
So part of it was the aquifer that was available to them. That idea that they have, they drill a massive, well to pull their water. And it's got I'm probably going to picture this, I'm not an engineer, but it's got a couple of places down there where they can pull from. And, like I said, you don't take much fresh water, but it goes down to a saltwater. It's very pure. With this type of production, if you're pulling it from an ocean, you can pull things in. You're pulling water from an aquifer that hasn't seen daylight in thousands of years, so there's benefit there. And as they're pulling it up, they can mix it to what they need. Because if you don't just go straight fresh water and salt, you kind of transition fish. And it allows them to do that. They also, one of the things they do is their wastewater is injected into the boulder layer. That was a benefit of being in Miami. There's a unique layer down there. This one is one of the things sometimes people talk about, but I will tell you is it's the same place Miami-Dade has 344 wells. It's in their wastewater. So the next hour is not, they're probably sending cleaner water than what's going through Miami, wastewater treatment.
And
Yeah, this is a minute. I was in Ireland several weeks ago. I went on a tour of an area where they were growing fish. And I'm assuming they were growing a lot of salmon and mussels. It was the best salmon I ever ate.
I was to understand most of the terminal big fish have worms in them. And I've seen in some fish, I have seen a worm. Is that what you know about?
So worms and wow, yeah, so, I can't, it's not necessarily my area. What I can tell you is when I go fishing, if I catch a big black drum as opposed to a small one, I'm a lot more likely to see worms in it. Certain species get them more frequently than others. I mean, I'm sure it's gonna get them from time to time. I don't know that they're, it's common. And it's Atlantic's not a publicly traded company, so I don't know everything that happens with them. If they have worm issues, I don't know anything about it.
Some countries use eel, and then now once they have eel, why don't you see more of those?
We had a grower for a while outside of Black, growing tanks, above ground tanks. A storm came and wiped out his system. He didn't have I shouldn't say that, his filtration and his pumps and stuff, they were elevated. The storm brought water too high and diminished it. Eel it's aquaculture in a lot of places. It's a high value fish. People really go for it. I think part of it would be kind of going back to, and I think they do that some in Maine. I think they have some eel farming, but I don't think we have much of a market for it down here.
When you go fish shopping in Publix, it says sustainably caught fish or sustainably, does that mean it's farmed fish?
It would kind of depend on the label. So you can get a couple things that'll say that. And there aren't hard and fast rules to those labels. Now, some of them come with a very thorough vetting process. If you see something that says MSC, Marine Stewardship Council, that fishery was completely vetted. Aquaculture has the same thing. ASC is Aquaculture Stewardship Council. There are lots of ways to make your fisheries more sustainable. Like when we talk about tuna, nets aren't as sustainable as what they call pole and troll. And if you ever want to waste an hour on YouTube, go type in like pole and troll tuna fishing, because they chum the water on these boats and then they have basically a bare hook, and the fish are in such a frenzy that they start out there when the thing chomps down and full, and it goes flying to the back of the boat for harvesting. But it's a better way to do it because you're not capturing a lot of other bycatch species in a net. It's only tuna that are in that group, and I think there's some stuff out there that they control, to some extent, control the sizes of fish they get. So sustainability kind of depends on what you're talking about, but some people use it, maybe they shouldn't. There are guys, you could say Marine Stewardship Council has rules to get a MSC label. Aquaculture Stewardship Council is a good one. Other environmental groups, if you're worried about it, you can go to the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's a stoplight system. You get a little pocket card you keep in your wallet or purse, and it's got green light species. It says go ahead and eat these. These are sustainably harvested. They're good for the environment. Yellow light, these are okay, but they kind of go either way. And then the red ones to avoid.
Oh, gosh.
So
Last question, Pat, if you'd like to unmute again?
Yes, I think you answered one question I had, but I couldn't quite hear the saltwater intrusion. And as I understand it, you're saying you're withdrawing from the Biscayne aquifer, but you're going below the freshwater lens down into the salt. Is that correct?
Yes, that's they pull 95% of the water they pull is salt water. And
Okay.
I realize this came aquifer, but I'm not, for some reason, I swear to say Florida, but I could be wrong. It seems like it should be this thing down.
I have a final question. I was very impressed by the yield, so many tons per acre. That's phenomenal. What makes the fish grow so fast? Are they given growth hormone?
No, it's very interesting. You know, if you think about it, and I'll probably butcher this too, probably have some biologists in the room who get this better than me, but, you know, terrestrial animals don't have feed conversion ratios anywhere near that, or the ability to grow that quickly. And part of it is, you know, humans we're fighting gravity. We spend a lot of energy, as terrestrial creatures dealing with standing up. It's not as hard as fish. You're just swimming around. You waste a lot less energy. The food conversion ratio is better. They grow quick.
But they don't grow much of that fast.
Well, so remember, that's not one tank. So they got 19 tanks and they're cycling through them. It's the stocking density and the ability to put a lot of them in there. They are able to grow them a little more quickly. I want to say if you're comparing it to traditional aquaculture with the net pens where you grow out off of Norway or Chile's coast, it's about 3 months slower. It can be a lot slower if you have to overwinter, which obviously isn't a problem if you're indoors in South Florida. You just grow them up till harvest. You never have to worry about your conditions not being optimal because of nature. So you just keep going. So that helps too. They don't lose, you know, a few months out of the year where the fish, you know, you're just doing what's called maintaining. You're feeding them enough to keep them alive, and you know they're not going to be late. You just want to get them to the warmer water and start going back.
Yeah. Thank you. Any more questions? If not, thank you so much. I mean,